Most women are not ultimately broken by a man's rage. They are systematically dismantled by his restraint. This is not an absolute truth, but a recurring pattern born from a complex dance of emotional conditioning and perceived control. To understand why silence is the more formidable force, one must first understand the strange, twisted comfort of chaos. A woman who has known volatility, whether in childhood or in past relationships, becomes a master navigator of storms. She learns to read the subtle shifts in atmospheric pressure that precede the shouting. She becomes an expert cartographer of arguments, mapping the familiar contours of a fight, the escalation, the climax, the eventual weary resolution. She knows the sound of a slammed door, not as a finality, but as a temporary punctuation mark, a signal that the next act of cooling off, the reconciliation, is yet to come. This chaos, for all its violence, has a structure. It has shape, sound, and motion. It is a language she is fluent in, and because she can interpret it, she believes she can manage it. Management implies a degree of control, and control, however illusory, feels like survival. But silence? Silence is an entirely different geography. It is formless, borderless, and unnavigable. Where chaos is a storm, silence is the still, airless vacuum of deep space. It offers no handholds, no landmarks. It becomes a mirror, but not a kind one. It is a reflection that offers back nothing but her own image, forcing her to hear the deafening echoes of her own thoughts, her own insecurities, her own unresolved turmoil. When a man chooses to go quiet, he is not just withholding words. He is performing a profound act of energetic withdrawal. He stops explaining, stops justifying, stops feeding the emotional ecosystem they once co-inhabited. He pulls his attention, his passion, his very presence inward, and in doing so, he cuts off the supply of emotional electricity she has come to thrive on. This electricity is the lifeblood of the chaotic dynamic. It confirms her impact, her relevance. Anger, in its raw, ugly heat, is still a form of engagement. It is a testament to the fact that she can move you, that her words and actions have the power to elicit a visceral, passionate response. It tells her, in a distorted but potent way, that you still care enough to be moved to fury. In the early, disorienting stages of this silence, her instincts, honed in the theater of conflict, will scream at her to restore the familiar terrain. She will push for a reaction, often with increased intensity. She might say things designed to wound, to provoke, to test the boundaries of your new resolve. These are not merely cruel words. They are probes launched into the void, desperate attempts to spark that familiar fire. She is trying to draw you back onto the battlefield because she knows every inch of that ground. She knows how to parry a verbal blow, how to stage a strategic retreat, how to use the heat of the moment to her emotional advantage. She is a veteran of intensity, but she is a novice in the face of absence. She has no training for this. Every raised voice, every tearful accusation, every passionate debate, no matter how painful, still anchors her firmly in a state of relevance. Your anger, however destructive, keeps her intimately involved in the world of your emotions. It confirms that she is a central character in your story. But when you stop reacting, a fundamental shift occurs. When your voice loses its emotional charge and levels out into a calm, neutral tone, when you look at her and simply see her without the accompanying need to fix her, defend yourself, or win the point, that is the moment the foundation truly crumbles. She feels the ground slip away not with a dramatic crash, but with a silent, terrifying lurch. She realizes, with dawning horror, that the argument isn't just paused. It is over. Not because a resolution has been reached, not because you have conceded defeat, but because you have laid down your weapons and walked away from the battlefield entirely. You have resigned from the war, and a war cannot be fought alone. Your silence is not a tactic within the old game. It is your announcement that you are no longer playing. And in that quiet departure, she is left standing alone in the arena. The echo of her own voice, her only companion, realizing that the power she thought she had was entirely dependent on your participation. The human mind is a meaning-making machine, wired to seek patterns, decode signals, and impose narrative on the world. Anger, for all its chaos, is a signal rich with data. It has a clear cause and a projected effect. She can analyze its tone, dissect its words, and anticipate its trajectory. She can rationalize it to herself and to others. He's just stressed from work, or he needs a night to cool off. Or he always gets like this. But he'll come around. Anger is a storm she can track on a radar. A puzzle with pieces she believes she can fit together. It is a language she understands, even if she dislikes it. But silence gives her nothing. It is not a puzzle. It is a void. And the human psyche recoils from a vacuum. Nature abhors it, and so does the emotional mind. A void cannot be analyzed, only filled. And so, in the absence of your emotional output, she is forced to turn inward. And the factory of her own anxieties begins its work. She fills the emptiness with her own raw materials, guesses, fears, and a gnawing, escalating guilt. The silence becomes a blank screen onto she projects her deepest insecurities. She begins a relentless mental replay of every recent interaction. Scrubbing through the footage frame by frame, searching for the precise moment you switched off. Was it that comment she made about his family? Was it when she dismissed his passion project? Was it her tone during that last trivial disagreement? The search is frantic, a desperate attempt to find a reason. Any reason, because a known problem, even a terrible one, is preferable to the terrifying ambiguity of none at all. This internalization is the silent, brutal power of your non-reaction. Had you shouted, had you listed your grievances, you would have given her a script. She could have argued with your points, deflected your accusations, or even painted herself as the victim of your temper. The conflict would have been external, a battle between two people. But by going quiet, you did not have to punish her. You simply stopped performing. You withdrew your energy, the invisible fuel that powered the dynamic. And suddenly, she is left alone on the stage, talking to herself inside an echo chamber built entirely from her own doubts and self-recrimination. Your voice is gone, and all she can hear is the reverberation of her own. This is where the true shift in power occurs. Anger, even in its most dominant form, is still a transaction. It is an exchange of emotional currency. By reacting, you are still participating in the market she knows how to manipulate. Your fury, your frustration, your heated defense, all of it, is a form of engagement that confirms her ability to affect you. It is a twisted form of validation, proof that she holds a key to your emotional state. But silence? Silence is the closing of the bank. It is a non-transaction. When you stop reacting, you stop giving her the emotional validation she came for. Every attempt she makes to provoke, to test the fences, to regain control, falls into a bottomless well, producing not even a splash in return. A man who can absorb chaos without returning it is a man she fundamentally cannot manipulate. Her entire toolkit, the carefully chosen barb, the wounded expression, the dramatic exit, becomes useless. The tools are designed for a substance, for a resistant force to push against. But they find no purchase in the formless void of your calm. That loss of influence, the terrifying realization that her levers no longer connect to any machinery within you, cuts far deeper than any argument ever could. It is not the pain of a wound. It is the existential dread of a pilot realizing her instruments have gone dead, leaving her flying blind in an endless silent sky. In the void left by your absence of reaction, a new dynamic is born. Your silence ceases to be merely a retreat and transforms into an active, potent force, a teacher. Its curriculum is not delivered through lectures or accusations, but through a relentless, quiet exposure to consequence. It begins to teach her the true weight of her own actions, not as you define them, but as they land in the still air between you. It demonstrates, without a single word, what it means when a man detaches, not with petulance, but with a dignity that is unassailable. This is a lesson she has likely never been forced to sit through. The initial phase of this education is one of testing. Instinct bred from the old chaotic rhythm will compel her to poke and prod. She will deploy remembered tactics, a sharp comment designed to sting, a sigh of theatrical disappointment, a question framed to elicit a defensive explanation. She is searching for a seam in your composure, a crack through which the familiar fire might still be lurking. She is trying to force a spark, any spark, because even a negative reaction is a form of energy, a confirmation that the old circuits are still live. But when her efforts are met with nothing, not coldness, but a profound and unshakable calm, something foreign begins to stir within her: accountability. In the theater of your anger, she could always project. She could deflect your points, blame your tone, or focus on the heat of the argument to avoid the substance of her own actions. Your emotion became the scapegoat for her introspection. Now, with the emotional static gone, there is nothing to obscure the consequences. She can scream at your frustration, but she cannot argue with your calm. Your stillness becomes a flawless mirror, and for the first time, she is forced to look squarely at her own reflection without the distortion of your reactive emotion. She sees the person who chose those words, who wielded that tone, who initiated that dynamic. It is uncomfortable, even painful, because there is no one else to blame. The mirror does not talk back. It only shows. And in that stark, honest reflection, there is no enemy to fight, only a self to confront. This is an environment hostile to the games of chaos, but it is the only fertile ground where genuine growth can happen. At first, her mind will rebel, seeking familiar narratives. She will convince herself you are playing a more sophisticated game, that the silence is merely a new tactic, and the old cycle of conflict and reconciliation will surely restart. She waits for the explosion she believes is inevitable. But as days accumulate into weeks, and your silence remains consistent, not the icy silence of punishment, but the centered silence of self-possession, the reality of the situation begins to solidify. The realization dawns that you are not orchestrating a punishment for her. You are engaged in the active protection of your own peace. This is the cornerstone of the lesson, and it is a strength for which she has no prior reference. The peace you are protecting is not a passive state of avoidance. It is an active, fortified position built on self-respect. It is a declaration that your inner stability is no longer negotiable currency in your interactions with her. When she senses this, it dismantles her entire understanding of the relationship's power structure. The control she thought she wielded was always conditional on your participation. Your refusal to participate any longer reveals that the true power, the power over oneself, was yours all along, and you have finally chosen to fully claim it. Your silence, therefore, becomes the most powerful lesson she will ever receive, a live demonstration of a man who has decided that his peace is more valuable than her drama. The recalibration is not a negotiation. It is a quiet, seismic shift in the very atmosphere you both breathe. You are not building walls of stone and mortar, loud and visible declarations of separation. That would be just another form of engagement, a defensive posture that still acknowledges the threat. Instead, you are simply no longer extending bridges. You have ceased the constant laborious work of spanning the emotional chasms she creates. This quiet decision to no longer meet chaos halfway, to no longer travel to a battlefield you did not choose, fundamentally transforms your role. You are no longer her opponent, locked in a struggle for dominance or vindication. You have become her lesson. The struggle is over because you have unilaterally declared peace, and a lesson does not argue with the student. You will see the evidence of this transformation in her eyes eventually. It is a flicker, a momentary widening, a dawning realization that the man she once believed she could trigger with a single well-aimed sentence now requires a legitimate, respectful reason to engage. The old pathways of communication, built on reactive emotion, have been severed. Access is no longer a given. It is a privilege that must be earned through mutual respect. This awareness is a humbling force. It drains the combative energy from her posture. Her tone, once sharpened for conflict, begins to soften, its edges blunted by this new, unsettling reality. Her words slow down, as if she is suddenly aware of their weight and the potential cost of misspeaking. Her entire energy, which once thrived at a fever pitch of chaos, drops, seeking to find a new, lower frequency. She is beginning, unconsciously at first, to adapt to you simultaneously. Your silence becomes your own most profound teacher. This is not a process of suppression, of bottling up rage until it poisons you from within. That is the act of a man who is still reactive, merely delaying his explosion. What you are learning is mastery. You are not bottling emotion. You are consciously choosing its direction, transforming its raw, chaotic power into focused intent. The frustration that once would have been wasted in a shouting match is now channeled into a project. The hurt that would have been weaponized into a cruel retort is alchemized into a deeper understanding of your own boundaries. You have stopped trying to win the emotional wars that only ever produced exhaustion as their victor. In this deliberate shift, your entire mode of communication evolves. Your words become rare, and because of their rarity, they gain density and value. They are no longer reactive, sprayed like emotional shrapnel in the heat of the moment. They become considered valuable and intentional. You speak not to fill the silence or to win a point, but to convey meaning. And in this shift, something profound happens within you. You start respecting your own boundaries more, because you are no longer allowing them to be constantly tested and trampled. You begin to instinctively choose stillness over frantic statements, purposeful distance over exhausting debate. This is the moment of your evolution. You are no longer the man pleading to be understood, desperately explaining your perspective to someone who refuses to listen. That man sought external validation. The man you are becoming is rooted in an internal certainty. He is a man who simply is understood, first and foremost, by himself. His worth and his peace are self-evident truths, not propositions up for debate. The desperate need for another person to validate your reality has been replaced by the quiet, unshakable certainty of your own. You have moved from seeking acknowledgement in another's eyes to finding it in your own soul. In the final accounting, the silence does not breed hatred or bitter closure. Instead, it performs a quieter, more permanent magic. It makes her remember. It calls forth the ghost of the man who first drew her in, not the reactive, emotionally entangled figure of recent history, but the one who possessed a strength that was inherent, not earned through conflict. That core of strength, the mystery of a contained and self-possessed man, returns to the forefront of her memory. But this time, it is purified. The ego that once might have been attached to it, the need to be seen as the strong one, has been burned away in the fire of your restraint. What remains is not a performance of dominance, but a state of simple, unassailable certainty. In this certainty, to a woman whose world has been built on the shifting sands of emotion, feels like gravity. It is a force she cannot fight, cannot manipulate. She can only adjust her own orbit to its undeniable pull. This is the lasting imprint you leave. A psychic fingerprint on her perception of relationships. She will carry this standard forward, often without conscious intent. The loud men, the ones who perform their passion with dramatic arguments and grand, fleeting gestures, will begin to feel small, insubstantial. Their noise will lack the weight of your quiet. She will find herself less tolerant of yelling, not because it frightens her, but because she now knows it to be a mask for insecurity. She will no longer trust the familiar rhythm of chaos because she has, however, briefly experienced the profound stability of true calm. The games she once mistook for intimacy will now feel like childish pantomimes. You became the benchmark, not through passionate pleas or romantic intensity, but through the unwavering discipline of your peace. Meanwhile, your own journey with silence deepens from a conscious practice into an intrinsic rhythm. You no longer have to hold your silence. It simply is as natural as breathing. You have stopped equating peace with loneliness, discovering instead that this quiet is the sound of alignment to your actions, your thoughts, and your values finally operating in harmony. You have consciously filled the space once occupied by drama with purpose. Your energy is no longer spent on defending your position, but on building your life. And this life, lived with intention, begins to speak for itself in a language more eloquent than any argument. The respect you once had to demand through effort now arrives unsolicited, drawn to the magnetic field of your composure. In a world addicted to noise, a man who moves with silent purpose feels like oxygen essential. life-giving and profoundly rare. Time, the great alchemist, eventually softens the sharp edges of memory into understanding. The sting of your absence in her life will fade, replaced by a slow dawning gratitude. She will come to see that, without that silence, without the void that forced her to confront her own echoes, she might have never undertaken the difficult journey inward. You did not just teach her about boundaries. You offered her a living demonstration of balance. And that is a lesson that, once integrated, cannot be unlearned. Even if she finds happiness elsewhere, K part of her will always measure the quality of that peace against the one she first encountered with you, a peace that arrived, ironically, at the very end. You, however, by the time the world catches up to the meaning of your silence, will already be living its proof in a new chapter. You will not need her validation or anyone else's applause. You are too occupied living the truth you discovered, that the loudest form of strength is a profound and unshakable serenity. You chose to step out of the exhausting noise of emotional warfare and into the quiet clarity of self-respect. And that is where you will remain, rooted in that still, steady place where no provocation can shake you, no drama can distract you, and no one will ever mistake your peace for weakness again. For the ultimate truth is simple. She was equipped to handle your anger, to navigate its storms and exploit its heat. But she was never, ever built to survive the vast, silent, and unassailable fortress of your peace.